Hello, hello, and welcome once again to the David Messiah YouTube channel, where our watchwords are to teach and to build back up the kingdom of Zion. This talk is a postscript to my last upload on a message to Trinidad and Tobago on the occasion of the visit of Osei Tutu II, king of the Ashanti. Sometimes happens soon after that video was posted, I got something in my feed, my YouTube feed, talking a little bit about the history of the royal line of the Ashanti. Unfortunately, although the headings and so forth, summary, so forth, I think were in English, the presentation itself was in Twi, the language they spoken in Ghana, which I started taking lessons in Twi at one time, but never did get very far with it. But anyhow, it was given. It's sort of like a little history lesson given by an Okomfo, a priest, in the Akan tradition, which spoke about that king, who was the king at the time, that the English took over. I think it was a king by the name of Prempeh. He had been made to basically fall upon his knees and kiss the boots of the conquering Englishman who had won that Anglo-Ashanti war. And afterwards, he was exiled to the island of the Seychelles Islands on the east coast of Africa. Well, that Okomfo priest historian was saying that some of that line that had been exiled to the Seychelles ended up in Peru, of all places, and also there was some information to the effect that some of the Ashanti royal line also made it to Tobago. And again, I am a priest of the Most High, given the gift of Urim and Tumim, and so I posed the question, at least as to Tobago, who would be those of the royal line in Tobago today? I mean, just obviously, I cannot ask the question for everybody in Tobago, but as it happens, I was given the information that Chief Secretary London, who had been Chief Secretary for a good long time, he was of that royal line, and also Dr. the Right Honorable Keith Christopher Rowley is of that royal line. So I don't know if he knows that, if that is tradition going in his family. Sometimes these traditions, these pieces of information get passed down in the family. And some hold on to it, and some hear it and then forget it. Well, okay. I'm now given that indeed, based on that, historical lesson given by the Okomfo priest historian, that I could put at least two faces to that. One, as I said, the Chief Secretary London, who would be in Chief Secretary in Tobago for a good long time, and also our Prime Minister here now, esteemed and estimable Prime Minister, Dr. the Right Honorable Keith Rowley. Well, let me just say, as I mentioned his name and title, Osei Tutu II had made a point of giving him the title Right Honorable. He is certainly entitled to the title the Honorable, being a member of Parliament. I think all members of Parliament are given the title the Honorable. But we will all of a certain age well remember that in the case of Dr. Eric Williams, he also carried the Right Honorable as a title, in addition to the plain the Honorable of all the members of Parliament. And I seem to remember vaguely that was somehow connected with an honor bestowed upon him by the queen, made him a companion or some sort of a something, indicating the favor of Her Majesty at the time that independence was negotiated. So he became a right honorable. At the same time that I think the Constitution, certainly the Republican Constitution, forbade citizens to accept titles of nobility, at the least, from foreign powers. But but all it is based on a sort of an honor given, a recognition given by a foreign in the case of Dr. Williams, a foreign king who was his Britannic or Her Britannic Majesty. Well, we will well remember that Dr. Rowley made a trip to Ghana at some point and was enstooled as a chief of the Ashanti kingdom, which makes him a companion, so to say, a small c companion of the king of the Ashanti. So he already is the honorable. So with an additional double honor like that, he gets also, I think, and it's well appropriate to carry the further sort of, the specification of that in the form of giving him the title, the Right Honorable. I think that's all that is. Now, whether that's recognized in Trinidad or not is obviously another question, and I certainly wouldn't sort of suggest to him that he now starts using it formally in terms of his his claims to titles and honors and so forth on his letterhead and whatever else might be. Not at all. That probably will not go down too well in this particular very divided land. But I just thought I'd mention it. And I won't even mention the other honor that was bestowed upon him by foreign sources in the form of that honorary doctorate from Howard University. I'll pay no attention to that one. Okay, so leave that to one side. So yes, so this would be of interest, I think, to my fellow citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, that Dr. Rowley, in fact, is of Ashanti royalty. And by extension, I think it may be of interest to all the Negro wherever scattered. Okay, that was one. The other one was I already mentioned it. The one who had been scattered into exile in the Seychelles, some of his line made it to Peru. And what I have been given by IYE-RE is that Peru is just a different way of vocalizing the very same Hebrew word that we here in Trinidad call paria, and that is really paria. So paria here and Peru there really is one and the same name. And I mentioned that in an earlier upload, a message to Trinidad and Tobago, audio letter to Trinidad and Tobago sometime in 2022. I forget what month it was exactly. And furthermore, that there was a ley-line connection between Siparia or Siparia and that place there in Peru that we associate with the Inca kings. Okay, well, it is starting now to come together in that the names are the same. Peru is Paria, same as Paria right here in Trinidad. And the idea of the ley-line connection, I mean, that's very sort of mysterious still to me. But in a simple sort of understanding, it is a sort of an energy line that could be used for fairly instantaneous transport. You get the right little sort of hookup to that energy line, and you get into whatever portal you need to get into, And by I think it might be by mere thought, if one is given the keys, you can sort of direct the ley line to take you there. Okay, so he told me to mention it. I was not going to mention it otherwise, because there may be something now to take place in the future when all will be made more clear that this would have already been made known to you, and at least seeded in some sense in the sort of consciousness of those who are now listening. Okay, so that is Paria. And he also let me to know that the term by which we refer to those kings who were Israelite initially, Inca, is actually, that too was a Hebrew word, and it wasn't Inca, it was Iye-Nega. Iye-Nega. And if you simply elide the initial vowel I and the second vowel E, you have YNGA, sort of an abbreviated form of writing that full word, which was Iye-Nega, for those kings. Iye-Nega. Nega was a word that came to mean king after it was used as a praise title for King David. So Iye-Nega is obviously saying something to the effect, Iye's anointed king. Okay, so that's what that is. But if you see YNGA and you misread the G, you think it's a C, then you start reading it, even in the Spanish, as Inca. But really it was Iye-Nega. Okay. So that's just a little additional piece of information. As I said, they were initially Israelite by paternal seed line, but I think I mentioned also in some earlier upload that there was at some point an invasion during the height of the Mongolian Empire. They had sent an expeditionary force, invading force of some kind, also over to the Americas, while the Mongolian Empire was at its height, because they had conquered China. And China had the technology in terms of ocean-going vessels of sufficient strength and capability and range and so forth. Because those Chinese treasure vessels were, many of them were 400, 450 feet in length, much bigger than what Columbus came on in terms of his vessel, the Santa Maria, was only about 50 feet in length. So, but the Mongolian Empire collapsed upon itself, and that invading force, there's a book about that by a fellow named John Ranking, that went into the whole historiography of that Mongolian invasion. It is from that invasion that Mongolian seed line, paternal seed line, was injected into the Americas, because originally it was the Negro that first had taken up residence here in the Americas. And we all have heard of the OL-MEC statues and so forth. We've all heard of the Maya people. Maya is just Ama-Iye, meaning the people of God. So from Ama-Iye that became Maya. And I've already given many sort of examples, including right here, the one in Trinidad, that this land was called Iere, which is Hebrew, and first populated by Negro. Well, once the Mongolian seed was injected on this side, obviously there would be mixing. And so, in fact, we had an clash, really, of seed lines. So the Caribs came to this land and essentially wiped out the original Arawak, which, by the way, the word Arawak comes from Iere also. It's Iere-Wa-Ka, Iere-Wa-Ka. And that gets sort of, reduced in some vocalization sense to Arawak. And the Carib, how they got their name, I explained that in the book, The Coming of David Messiah, somewhere. Their name was Kalinago, and that's the name still used in St. Vincent and I think, is it Dominica? Yes, Dominica. Kalinago, which is Hebrew. The Nago part is really just a variant of Nega. Same way that the Yoruba also call themselves the Nago people. Again, the meaning in here is in the consonants. The vowels impart nuance, impart tone, and very often used for ironic kind of expression. We like to play with language. So if you know you come from David, or maybe you have forgotten you come from David, but somebody has been telling you come from David, okay, and and King David was known as Nega David, then in a sort of an irony, which we still do in the way we do calypso, you know, somebody might say, well, we are the Nago people. You know what I'm saying? So it's acknowledging the information, but putting a twist on it merely by distorting the vocalization through the vowels to put a little irony on it, okay? So that somebody might get a laugh or a rise out of it. But really, in its objective meaning, it means nega. But again, it's not a term it's not a formal term that defines who the Yoruba are as a people. It's just a sort of a term. It might even be a term of some risibility. The Nago people, you understand? Okay. So that term also was used and still is used in the word that is used for the Carib people there in Dominica and St. Vincent as Kalinago. And when you break down the prefix of Kali, again that letter K is a Hebrew letter Ket, which means, you know, over there or on the other side, or out, because it's depicted by the outside of a tent. So from the one looking at it, the one looking at it is in his tent, and he's looking at the neighbor's tent, so to say. Okay, when that consonant ket is brought into play for whatever word it may be used in. So ka, and then la is from the consonant lamed, which is depicted by a shepherd's staff. So which further emphasizes that, okay, on that tent on the other side, well, there's sort of two sort of meanings to it. One is that the shepherd's staff is a reference to the king, that's number one. But also number two, it implies a certain distance, a certain separation, because a shepherd's staff is a long staff, and it's a way to stay where you are and sort of grab the hind legs or even the front legs of the sheep that the shepherd is shepherd over. Okay, so Kali Nago, again the reference to the Nega. So it is suggesting a people who are related to the Nago people, but from a distance. In other words, they're not of the line of the Nega. They are more like what in Trinidad we would call pumpkin vine family. You've kind of married into it. Because when the Caribs came, or the Kalinago came, as I said, they basically went to war against the Arawak and genocided them, basically. But the invading force, Mongolian invading force, did not bring too many women with them. So they had to marry with the Israelite women that they found. So they killed off the men and they took the women. So that the Kalinago people, the Carib people, are a mixture of Mongolian on the paternal side and Israelite or Negro on the maternal side. So that's where the term Kalinago comes from. Okay, it's sort of adverting to a pumpkin vine relationship of those who are now Kali-Nago relative to the original Israelite people who are of the same root as the Neger, King David, Neger David. Okay. And Carib comes from Kali-Nago. Why? Because let us see another K. The C of Carib is the same sound value as the K of Cali. That's just an orthographic sort of choice that somebody made at some point to spell Carib with a C instead of a K. That's one. And then the other letter, instead of an L, we have an R. Why? Because the Mongolian and Chinese and Korean people have a difficulty with the letters L and R. They are essentially interchangeable. And by the way, it is the same with some Bantu peoples. They get the L and the R kind of mixed up. Okay, so Kali can essentially easily become Kari. And instead of referring to using the term Nago to make reference to the Neger, King David, the term of Ba or Be or Bit is used, which is that suffix that denotes the house. So it's the house of the Kali people. You understand? So Kari Ba. And that gets shortened to Caribe or Carib. You understand? So that's where Carib comes from, and that is its relation to the Kali-Nago term that's also used for the Carib people who were there again up at St. Vincent and Dominica. So they came to Trinidad and essentially, as I said, and history records that, we all learned that in school, essentially wiped out the Arawai. Okay? But they are not Israelite by paternal seed line. They're heavily Israelite by maternal seed line, but not paternal seed line, which makes a big difference for certain purposes. Okay? In other words, they are not of the bloodline of Abram, Isaac, and Jacob in general, although there might be exceptions in some cases. Okay, so that is another little tidbit that the people of this land may find interesting. A little interesting tidbit to know. Okay, and he also wanted me to mention that and I'd mentioned it in the earlier upload and in other uploads, that the Negro were the first to populate the Americas. And I cited in that regard 2nd Esdras chapter 14, around verse 41, because we went off and started populating lands where never before mankind dwelt. And that premise is a huge premise that's there in the Book of Mormon. But I won't go further into that. The Book of Mormon goes into that in full and excruciating detail as to how one branch of the line of Joseph through Manasseh, through that one who came to be called Lehi, he led the group. His former name had been Shaphan, and he had been a scribe in the house of the last king of Judah, whose name was Zedekiah. He was made to lead a group over here to the Americas also, and that would have taken place around 606 BC, a little bit before or at the time of the invasion by the first kingdom of the of the Gentiles, which was Babylon. Okay, so one can use the Book of Mormon as a sort of a case study, to sort of typify that general phenomenon that had started happening already around 722 BC at the time of the Assyrian invasion. Okay, so that I mentioned the OL-MEC. Again, that's another word, it's a Hebrew word that we know otherwise as LA-MEC. LA-MEC was the father of Noah, which is interesting in and of itself, but you know, when you start reading the Hebrew language, and there are no vowels, there are only the consonants. How one vocalizes the word that is written becomes a sort of a guessing game, unless you have Urim and Thummim to let you know how the vocalization should take place. You understand? So they call it OL-MEC, but really it was LA-MEC. Same name as the father of Noah. But anyway, that's sort of going off. And I'd mentioned that there was a ley-line connection also from Siparia here in Trinidad to Mexico. I kind of had it in my mind that it was that place that is where Mexico City is now located, which was it Teotihuacan. But he let me know, no, it wasn't Teotihuacan, it was to Mexico, exactly to this place called LA-MEC or La Maca. You understand? Okay. That's another piece of information just for future reference, because, you know, it may become interesting when certain things happen in the future. And we will see what those might be. Okay. I also should make a couple of corrections. Number one, I think I mentioned that the date given for the invasion, the laying of siege of Babylon to Jerusalem was the 10th day of the 10th month. That is true. But I think I had mentioned it was recorded in the book of Ezekiel, chapter 24, verse 1. No, it's Ezekiel chapter 25, verse 1. Okay, and I'd sort of started making a point, which I didn't quite complete in terms of the making of it. Those who have a sort of a mathematical turn of mind may have finished the thought for me. But I was trying to, if you remember, in the book of Hosea, chapter 6, verse 2, there was a scripture to the effect that we would essentially be a slumber for 2 days, a day being 1,000 years, and in the third day, third 1,000-year period, he would wake us up again, and we shall live in his sight. Well, so that is adverting to a slumber period, so to say, of some number between 2,000 at the lower limit, because it is elsewhere prophesied that it shall be for a time and times and a dividing of time. So combine that with be asleep for 2 days, and in the third day he shall wake us up. Okay, so start date for the siege of Jerusalem, laid upon Jerusalem by Babylon, 606 BC, December 31st. And I was made to give the information also that in return, Israel, with Russia being an Israelite power for that purpose, laid siege in return upon Babylon as of December 31st, the very same day on the calendar, but in the year 2021. So if you do the arithmetic from 606 BC, December 31st, to 2021 AD, December 31st, that is a total time of 2,625 years. Okay, so it's in the third day, a day being 1,000-year period. So that was the point I wanted to end up making, but I never did quite finish making it, although the information was there to be applied for that purpose. Okay, and again, it tallied also with the book of the book of Daniel. Well, not also. It's also in a different way, sorry. Daniel had spoken of, I think it's Daniel chapter 8. Let me see if I can bring it up here. I don't want to get this one mixed up, and my memory seems to fail me sometimes. I think I have it right, but I'm off. Yes, Daniel 12, verse 7. And I heard the man clothed in linen which was upon the waters of the river, when he held up his right hand and his left hand unto heaven, and swear by him that liveth forever, that it shall be for a time, times, and an half. And when he shall have accomplished to scatter the power of the holy people, all these things shall be finished. So this time, times, and a half is only an approximate, time limit. So the first time is 1,000 years. The second times is add another 1,000, so that's 2,000 years, and then half of a time being 1,000 years, so it's 2,500 years, but give or take. So it wasn't intended to be taken quite so literally. And then, if you go by the calculation I've just given you from 606 BC to 2021 AD, it turns out to be 2,625 years for the laying of siege, from laying of siege to laying of siege. Laying of siege first by Babylon upon Jerusalem, and then ending with laying of siege by Israel in the form of Russia upon Babylon. 2,625 years, which is 52 Jubilee cycles. Each Jubilee cycle is of 50 years. So that's the 2,600 years part, and then another 25 years on top of that is a half of a Jubilee cycle. So 52 and a half Jubilee cycles. And 52 is an interesting number. If you do numerology, 5 plus 2 is 7. So it is a numerological 7. 7 is the number of completion. And then add another half a Jubilee cycle. That's 25 years. 2 plus 5 is again 7. So you have, numerologically, you have a double 7, which is the sort of emphasizing that, okay, it is now done. So the Most High has given to, Esau, essentially, from the very first kingdom of the Gentiles all the way down to all of those kings that arose during the fourth kingdom of the Gentiles. All of those really are Babylon, and all of those have Esau in their midst. Okay, because it was Esau that has been the one exercising the dominion by the sword for this length of time. So this is now what is now up. His time is up. And I let me again emphasize the 2nd Esdras chapter 9, verse 5, where it says, and I read it again, because this is now what we're seeing all over the world. It is happening at increasing sort of pace and intensity. 2nd Esdras chapter 9, verse 5, for like as all that is made in the world hath a beginning and an end, and the end is manifest, verse 6, even so the times also of the highest have plain beginnings in wonders and powerful works, and endings in effects and signs. Well, in what we're going through now is the end of Esau's time, so that will be accompanied by signs and effects. But we also at the same time witnessing the beginning of the time of Jacob, because the dominion is shifting from Esau to Jacob. So as to Jacob, we're going to see what? Wonders and powerful works. So what is a powerful work? It's kind of like a big sort of manifestation. In an earlier upload, I was given to give that April 6, 1970 marked the beginning of a 50-year wave, the identity reclamation wave, during which the Negro was supposed to, in effect, wake up out of that slumber. Yes, we were being woken up, but at the same time, it was upon us now to reclaim that understanding of who we were as children of Abram, Isaac, and Jacob. And there was a huge kind of flowering, artistic flowering, certainly in the music and in other things, that made us feel good. The question was posed. In that upload I gave as an example that calypso called Black Identity, which in effect laid down the problem to come back to a clear understanding of who really we were, that were so-called black nowadays, called black. And then at the end, again in terms of song, I was led to use the song Jerusalem as a sort of the conclusion of the matter, okay, with the song Jerusalem answering the identity question or project or problem that was posed at the beginning of that 50-year identity wave. The answer being that, well, really we are the people of Jerusalem. We are Zion. That's who we are. So that was the answer now that was supposed to, and most of us have now gotten that clue that that's exactly who we are. But still and all, there are many of us who still haven't quite cottoned to the idea that indeed that is who we are. And there's another upload for those who want to know, well, how do you prove that we are indeed the people of Israel, the people of the book, the people of Jerusalem, the people of Zion? How do you prove that? There's a whole upload on just that question. How do you prove that? And then prove it to a point, a sort of a schoolboy logical point, as if you were proving Pythagoras' theorem, where there's not even the chance, the possibility of a mistake. You understand? It is so clear-cut the way the Most High set it up for us. Okay, so I would suggest to those who are still unclued as to really who we are, the Negro that is, as a matter of identity, to take a look at that upload on proving the Negro identity as being that of Israel. Okay, all right. So those were the main points I wanted to make in this sort of postscript, but with a sort of a hearkening again to this idea that we are seeing wonders and powerful works. So in the case of April 6, 1970 being the start of that time, the identity wave, we now have if you like, the millennial wave of this time of Zion associated with the seventh millennium. And what are these powerful works? Well, we're seeing it there with the coup in Niger, preceded by a coup in Mali and Burkina Faso. And we're seeing that even though France and the United States now want to kind of bring back the old so-called democratically elected president, who really was just a French puppet, the huge demonstration, they filled up that stadium, that football stadium in Niamey there in Niger. So you know that this is a powerful work, just as April 6, 1970 coincided with that Black Power rebellion here in Trinidad and the killing of Basil Davis by a policeman. And when they had that funeral for Basil Davis, that too was a huge demonstration. So this is one of those wonders and powerful works that marks it as one of the times of the highest. In other words, the Most High's hand is present. So the Most High's hand is present with the awakening that is taking place there, certainly in Francophone Africa. And by the way, he said, let them to know that this will end badly for France. If France thinks it can walk back in with the French Foreign Legion or whoever to try to take back Niger, they have got another thought coming. And in fact, essentially all of Francophone Africa, even the ones who now might be wanting to seem as though they are on the side of democracy and so forth, and where the presidents there might be a little bit shaky themselves, so they'd be afraid to kind of make common cause with the rebels, so-called rebels, but who really represent the real, force that is coming up from underneath of the people, as we see in Mali, in Burkina Faso, and now in Niger. So countries like Senegal and Guinea and Congo also, and the other, I think about 14 of those former French colonies, which have still been under kind of a colonial occupation by France in the particular arrangements that were made at the time of so-called independence, whereby France still controls their monetary system, where France keeps 50% of their reserves, where, where they have total sort of license to do what they had been doing in Niger, which was to control the mining of the ores and of the gold and so forth. And Niger has now said, no, we're not going to send you gold anymore. We're not going to send you your uranium anymore, or our uranium anymore, unless you pay a proper market price. Instead of this 5% of what the market price is, you understand? So in other words, they're saying enough is enough. And before this wave, because it is now Jacob that is going to have the dominion. It has already been taken from Esau, Edom, in the spiritual. And that includes France. And Macron is a sign of that. Why? Because Macron was an underling, a functionary working for the House of Rothschild. And United States foreign policy, as it is managed by people like Victoria Nuland and Anthony Blinken, and by the so-called neocons, they are also working not for the people of the United States, they are working for the House of Rothschild. That's a Rothschild project. And it is the House of Rothschild that owns the Federal Reserve System. So the United States dollar is not even issued by an arm of the United States federal government. No, it is issued by this private entity called the House of Rothschild. But they are that great whore that rideth that beast. That is Mystery Babylon, from whom the United States takes orders, the UK takes orders, NATO ultimately takes orders from them. And there is an upload on the site called Gog and Magog Defined, which addresses that question of who really are Gog and Magog. And it ties back to that House of Rothschild. And that's why, because there's so many sort of arms of this beast, so many heads and horns as the case might be, in Revelation chapter 18 verse 2, where it is prophesied, and it is stated in prophecy, Babylon the Great is fallen, is fallen. There is that echo to carry the idea that Babylon the Great is not one singular entity. It has been operating as though, like a dance of the seven veils. Okay, when you think you've got them defined, you strip away one veil, okay, and you still have another veil to pull back before you get to really who it is. You understand? So this is also what is at work in the world. The wonders and the powerful works that are accompanying this change over from dominion by Esau to dominion by the younger twin Jacob, who is the Negro in all of his also forms and variations. Okay? So even like I just read in the news today about the wildfire there in Hawaii, Hawaii, that land was named by our people. Hawa is the Hebrew, paleo-Hebrew for the name of the Most High, the specific name of the Most High, which is the highest or the Most High. So his name is Iye-Hawa. And that is the name that was wrongly written in the King James as Jehovah. The way it is, the way the orthography is given, we would using a normal sort of English pronunciation or vocalization of the way that word is spelled, we would say Jehovah. But really it was always intended to be vocalized as Iye, that prefix, and then the suffix is Hawa, or rather Hawa, because the Ha is just the definite article. And so typically you would have the emphasis on the highest part of that suffix, so Hawa, as opposed to Hawa. Okay, so when it is written as Jehovah, we tend to put the stress on the second syllable, Jehovah. But really it's Iye-Hawa. Anyway, so Hawaii belonged originally to a Negro people that made it to that land and named themselves after the Most High. So Hawaii is saying the children of the Most High. Just as those that made it down to New Zealand call themselves the Amauri, which means the people of the East. Can also mean the people of the light. Because they had traveled so far east, they thought, well, okay, nobody any further east than we are. So we are the Amauri, the people of the east. And that has come down to us now as the Maori people of New Zealand. So everywhere we went, in accordance with 2nd Esdras chapter 13, verses 40 to 45, we tended to give ourselves names that harked back to who we were as Israelites. And we tried to live up to the law that we were not keeping there in the inheritance land. We were the original Gauls in Western Europe. That word there was Gawalat, which could be, one variation of that in terms of, simplifying the word is Gawals. And from Gawals you get to Gauls. But another variation of that is from Gawalat you get Galts, Gawalts. So you get Galts. And then from Galts you get Celts. As a matter of fact, there's a fellow here in Trinidad, I think there's a Galt family, which is, the name is adverting to an original Celtic origin, which would have been there in the British Isles. And the word Druid is actually Daruod, which is David, the root of King David, which is the same semantic sort of referent as Negro or Negar, where the resh consonant comes in to indicate the root of that which is the Negar. You understand? So Negro or Negara or Nigra, all these are variations of the same word. Okay, and the meaning is the same. It is the tribal, those people of the same tribal origin as King David. That's what that means. Well, Deruod, which becomes Druid, is saying exactly the same thing. But in the one case, Nega is a reference to David. In the other case, Dal or Deod is naming David specifically. So Deod, and you throw in the Resh consonant and its idea of being the root of something, you get Deruod, and from that you get Druid. Those people who are of the same tribal origin as Deod, David, you understand? So it's the same word. And here, when we were pursuing that identity project, and we brought this thing called Rastafari, wrongly, it's based on a completely wrong idea, but anyway, I'll deal with that in another upload at some point. We went back to wearing what we call dreadlocks. Well, dread is again referencing the people, the Negro people, the Druid people, the people of the same tribal origin as King David, where you let the locks grow, and the locks, or if you let Negro locks to grow, they lock. Okay? And so they call dreadlocks, which literally means Negro locks. That's what that means. So there's a lot that we can tease out in terms of understanding once we go back to the Paleo-Hebrew, and they've tried to hide key words by messing with the language, which I've proven, I think, conclusively in chapter 2 of the book, The Coming of David Messiah. Okay, so, but I was on the topic of the powerful works. So we're going to be seeing all these powerful works, and there's signs in some of them as well. Because which is this country that has just now rebelled? Had the coup, the military coup, is Niger. Strip away the vowels, you have NGR, which spells, it's the same consonantal, sort of configuration as Negro. Niger is just another way of saying Negro. And that's the Niger is just a fancy French way of also saying Niger. You understand? So even in the country where we're seeing this powerful work, huge demonstration, and they're all flying Russian flags, isn't it? Isn't that also kind of a strange thing? That's another powerful work. Why? Because Russia has now proven itself over NATO. There's another recent upload entitled NATO's Nakedness is Exposed. And it is exposed by Russia, which in another upload I've made I've given the information that Russia is the king of the south of prophecy, referred to in Ezekiel chapter 38, 39, and also Daniel chapter 11, verse 40, in contradistinction to the king of the north, which is NATO and its allies. Because there's nothing particularly, southerly about Russia. Russia is actually fairly far north in purely geographical terms. But these people of the global south, which is Niger, are flying Russian flags. Isn't that a powerful work in and of itself? Indicating that, okay, people now understand of the global south that have been under the thumb of French neo-colonial exploitation. They now realize, wait a minute, we have a savior in Brother Putin. Because as long as Brother Putin is around, he can come in and save us from the French, from the Americans. That's another powerful work. And the same logic will apply to all of the other Francophone territories. So Brother Macron doesn't even quite yet get it. Well, logically, I think they have to do what they're now doing, try to defend that which is not theirs, because they've been, they've been stealing uranium, basically, and no doubt also stealing gold, okay, in terms of the prices that they pay to the Nigerians for that which they've been taking. Well, the same logic applies to all the other Francophone territories. Okay, and those local elites who have been benefiting from that as French puppets will suddenly find that their rule is a little bit wobbly. And those who will not adjust quickly enough will find themselves taken down by the people. So that's the choice they will have. To become a little bit rebellious themselves and go with the people and eject France. Or stick with France and find themselves brought down. That's what's going to happen. And he actually let me to know that that's what's going to happen. Okay? So with that, I think I will stop this postscript that has gone on far longer than I anticipated. But, when you're doing God's work, you never know exactly, how long things will take. So with that, I give all praise, I give all glory, I give all thanks, I give all exaltation unto the Most High God, Iye-RE. And to all those still listening, I say, Shalom.